Hey everyone, Margarita here. I want to talk in this video today about the ongoing Fukushima flushing that has been going on for the past 2 years. When it all started, what's going to happen going forward, how I came to learn this information, and what that means for me and my son going forward, because this actually changes the outcome of our lives in the future. So, most people know Fukushima, the disaster happened in March of 2011. And then they created storage bins to store all of this radioactive rainwater in for well over a decade. And eventually they had to figure out something to do with it because they weren't going to be able to hold on to it much longer. Part of the problem is they can't get rid of the component called tritium. I think it's called tritium. And the company that's in charge of all this, it's called TEPCO. So they're the regulators of releasing this radioactive material into the Pacific Ocean. It does not matter that it's only going into the Pacific Ocean, because our Earth is made of 75% water, and all of our bodies of water are connected somewhere where everything connects. So with the Earth being made up of that much water, it basically blankets the entire Earth with each flushing. So with that amount being released with each time they do this, because it's taken me a couple years to pick up on this and the pattern of it all, they are releasing different amounts each time. And where I live in Michigan near the Great Lakes, I'm about 5 minutes from the water. So uh, it is a pretty high level where my house is. So um, that causes a pretty significant amount of it to reach my house about a week after the flushing starts. And that's how it's been each time that this has occurred. So from, I believe it was shortly before Labor Day weekend in 2023 is when they started flushing this stuff. And it took about a week to get to where I am in Michigan. And every time after that they've done this, it's been about the same time period. So each year, what they've been doing is releasing 4 to 7 batches of this each year, and they reduce down the material and cycle it through different ways to rid the toxic components of it. And the one that they can't get rid of is tritium. So TEPCO is the company who is overseeing all of this over in Japan, and they're the ones who get to decide what level is safe and what's not safe. Technically, no level is safe, and they don't know the outcome of what's going to happen to humanity and the planet and our food supply. But I can tell from what I've learned in the past 2 years and my life experience with my injuries, what I have noticed personally. Most people will never have any reason to look into this to this degree. There are going to be situations where the hospitals and urgent cares are going to see a rise in patients when this flushing, shortly after it begins, and I'd say the weeks to maybe a month following, people having some pretty severe issues. Although the medical system isn't trained, those people aren't trained on that this is going on or that this is what's affecting all of these people. So all they're going to see is an uprise in patients. And what it is most people don't have the degree of an injury that I have, and or maybe they do have some type of condition or disease or something, and they'll become a little more affected than somebody who doesn't. Either way you look at it, these people are going to present to the hospital system or their doctor's office or the urgent care with certain symptoms, and they're not really going to be too specific, and the medical professionals are only taught to treat the symptoms, not actually figure out what it is. And those people don't have the degree of injury I have, so they're not going to ever figure any of this out. Now, I have noticed a couple of the times when the amount they flushed was a little higher, this has affected regular people with no condition as well. So with me, because I have carbon monoxide poisoning at a cellular and tissue level, and so does my youngest child, that is embedded in our cells and our tissues from the long haul, from our initial injuries. It began 9.5 years ago. So the effects from that are permanent. It also broke through our brain tissues at 2 different times. Although one of those incidences, we both had a brain injury at the same time. I had an even worse injury almost 2 years later. That brain swelling episode completely blew apart every layer of my brain tissue, and it took me years to attempt to repair it to a certain degree where I could even begin to pick up the pieces of my life, or not even knowing if I was ever going to get to go from point A to point B or go out to dinner or go here or there ever. Wasn't sure for some years. So, me doing hyperbaric oxygen treatments on a long term basis is what reversed everything to the degree it has. That is the reversal for carbon monoxide poisoning. It has to be pressured out of your cells and your tissues. Once you're overloaded with carbon monoxide, if it's in your blood, and or it depends on if you had one large exposure or numerous exposures, or how long this went on for, or the degree of your poisoning, or if there's brain injuries included in that. It doesn't matter. It leaves the blood 90 days after and starts settling into the system if it hasn't been cleared. So I know most people's carbon monoxide poisoning, it doesn't break through their brain tissue, and if it does, they don't live to talk about it. With me, I had a very extreme case, so if you watch my other videos, you'll know that already. And it took so many years to repair that brain tissue to where it was over 60% sealed. And then I had a significant re-injury about 3.5 years in from the extreme part of my injury, where I was very close to having the majority of that brain tissue sealed. And if that had not happened, I would be in a way different place today. And the last several years of flushing and all the spills and problems that have been going on, those would have all affected me differently as well had that re-injury not occurred. That re-injury was caused by my ex and by the Flat Rock Police Department, all in the same 24-hour period. So if you watch my other videos, I talk about that in some of the other videos already. But due to the results of that, I'm forced to learn what's going on with the Fukashima flushing. I had already been through several spills, flushes, and explosions prior to that, and I was already aware of how it was affecting me. Each substance, each spill, each chemical, gas, whatever it is, they all have slightly different effects. Although the main problem is because my cells and tissues are overloaded with carbon monoxide, and the brain tissue is open, that brain tissue that's all broken is what stops chemicals and gases and particles of any kind entering one's system. So because that's not sealed all the way within myself and my son, everything flows right through upon every breath. That's not, nobody else is out here walking around in that manner. Usually if somebody has that brain injury to that degree where that's destroyed, there is a surgery people can have to repair that, or they get treatment right away. They're not left to die without help or proper treatment. Now, if I did not have my life's work behind me and everything I had done along the way, we wouldn't have survived the injury at all. We would have been gone about 6 years ago, because it cost me close to $200,000 to get us to where we are today. So with the way the brain tissue is open, everything enters right through. There's nothing to stop it or block it. And it then adds to the already existing carbon monoxide, which is loaded up in the brain. The brain takes more oxygen, so it's loaded in the brain more than the system. But with where we are today, we have removed a significant degree of what we initially had taken in. So it adds to the already existing particles in the cells, in the tissues, in the brain. And we have immediate symptoms, or it can be delayed. It may not be severe right away. It may not be severe till later that day or the next day is usually when it happens. And it doesn't matter what re-exposure we have to any gas or particle, it's usually within that time frame. It's not usually in that moment, but it can be, depending on what it is. So once it gets added to our system, it's taking over the oxygen. The carbon monoxide in our systems is already taking over oxygen, so we're already in a fragile state. And then when another chemical or gas gets added to that, it also adds to the carbon monoxide in our cells and in our systems and takes over the oxygen even further. And then it creates lack of oxygen related symptoms. And also the particles aren't getting filtered out the way everybody else breathing the air, the way that's happening for everybody else. It's loading up. And the only way to get it out is hyperbaric oxygen treatment, along with some other homeopathic methods, which I have not shared with the rest of the world yet. There's many different things I've had to use along the way. So I will get to the point where I talk about all of that down the line. Right now isn't really the time to talk about that. I want to get other information out first. But I will eventually get there and talk about all these things I've had to do along the way and what I have to do daily just to attempt to have some functioning, because daily functioning has never been restored from the day that I gave birth suffering from carbon monoxide poisoning. Even further, once I became overloaded with it almost 2 years later, no daily functioning whatsoever has ever been restored. So I'll talk about that all later. But the problem I'm having is how the particles enter in. It loads up, takes over the oxygen immediately. So with the Fukashima flushing, the tritium that goes in, it's burning and prickling depending on how much I take in. Because if I don't know what's going on, I'll definitely know after I expose myself for a short period of time. I'll know shortly after if the flushing is going on and I'm unaware. I will know shortly after. If I've taken in too much and I wasn't aware, I'll have an extreme incident where I'll be down for week. Like it could be a week or more, could be a month or more, depending on how much I've taken in, and then how often I'm treating with the hyperbaric oxygen chamber. So currently, all I have is my home chamber, since the private centers are permanently closed with where I live in Michigan. I don't foresee them opening any more private centers of the mono chamber type anywhere near me anytime in the near future. So that leaves me in a sticky predicament, because since I was working against the clock initially, from the time I was injured to the time the first spill happened that I experienced, which was technically it was a chemical spill, which was in Wixom, Michigan, and that was in 2018. And I wasn't aware that that's what it was for a few more years. And then I figured it out backwards because I had not started treatment yet. I was very close to death. And then I had the Ford gas spill where I live in Flat Rock in 2021. And that was a very large amount. And it ended up forcing me away from my home temporarily for a little over a year before I could return to my home safely. So because I'd already been through those spills, I was already aware that these spills are a problem. I had already done quite a bit of reading into different large companies spilling, how it all works, what the EPA technically allows, and how they test for it, which isn't actually legit. They never even test the outside air, which that makes it a problem to travel from point A to point B if you have a serious issue like me. So learning from the different spills that I went through, I knew that I was working against the clock before something more significant happens or before another large spill near me happens. And I knew I most likely wouldn't survive if I didn't work quickly to restore the brain tissue that I already had repaired to a certain degree. I had it almost 90% repaired. And if that re-injury had not happened in 2021 before the Ford spill, I definitely wouldn't have been forced from my home. I could have sheltered in place. It wouldn't have been as severe. But it was about 90% sealed. However, I would have needed to stay put for about 3 to 6 months to get it more solidly sealed. Everything was still very fragile and open. So traveling out and about in the world, I would have had to stop traveling out and about, maybe except for to go to work the couple nights I was working during that time period. However, that did not happen because of the re-injury. I basically had to take many steps backwards and then try to treat very fast to get back to where I was. And it was only about a month and a half later that the center went 100% self-pay. And initially, I did have private insurance covering the first 2.5 years because I do have one of the covered conditions. I still had co-insurance, although it wasn't 100% self-pay. My son's was, because it was a large-scale cover-up. Once that happened, I knew it was going to be a lot harder to get everything sealed shut to the degree I needed it, because I had already been through 2.5 years of treatment. So I was already well aware that I needed to treat minimally 4 days a week at the center. They're only open 5 days a week, but 5 days a week gives you the best results, and continuously until you make significant progress. So I knew to come up with, and which I could have done in sets at that point with where I was at that point, I would have just had to treat $10,000 at a time, basically. Most people have a hard time coming up with that one time, let alone repeatedly. So, with me being permanently injured and limited on how much I was working, I knew it was going to be a lot harder to finish sealing that brain tissue shut. And I was correct, and I only had more problems from there. And at that point, treatment was still required 1 day a week at the center just to maintain where we were, to not lose anything further and not slide backwards any further. Because what we take in a week living modified lives is a problem, and it has to be removed to maintain the level we're currently at. And it's been that way since 2021. So about 4 years. And 2 years ago, that treatment then stopped, the weekly treatment, where I was at least maintaining. And prior to that, those first 2.5 years, the treatment was daily. So to get back to that daily treatment to seal all that brain tissue shut never happened. Only further issues happened, more re-injuries, more re-exposures, more flushing, more problems other people created, more of the ongoing crimes against me as well, because that plays a huge role in everything I've been through regarding my medical condition on many different levels. And so it's left us in a place that's not really the greatest. So when all this Fukushima flushing started, everything started loading up into my system immediately. I don't need somebody to tell me anything on any flushes or spills. I don't need a detector of any kind. The particles load right in immediately and stay in. Depending on how much is taken in, can stay days, weeks, or months. And if enough is taken in, it'll cause death. That's the end result. It's not a optional thing. It's not questionable. Once something like that is going on, we have to remain sheltered in place. And it's not optional to travel from point A to point B or go out and about. A lot of these times I can quickly go get what I need from the grocery store, or I order off Amazon and get things delivered. But this is also the reason my son has to be homeschooled, because we're going to be dealing with this for the rest of our lives with where our injuries are today. So other than that, when those flushes happen of any kind, whether it's Fukushima or another flush or a spill, that is the result. We do have to shelter in place. And this year in 2025, we've lost half of this year sheltering in place from different spills. Between the wildfires, the Ford Motor Company of Flat Rock spilling again, and the Fukushima flushing, we've lost, it's been over half. And it's end of August, we've lost over half of this year having to shelter in place. So I had to learn a lot more than what the average person would ever be forced to know. Nobody else is going to experience the symptoms that I do, because nobody else is walking around with their cells and their tissues and their brain open and everything overloaded with carbon monoxide. That's not happening to other individuals. So with me, I can feel it with every breath. It will load up in the brain first. It then floods the rest of my system, and it takes over the oxygen at a very rapid rate. It doesn't matter what it is. There's already carbon monoxide in there that takes over the oxygen continuously. So once that little bit of extra whatever it is gets added to it, that's why it's so deadly. That's why our condition is so deadly. And we're very fragile, and other people are ignorant to our condition, especially those in our lives. Everybody's extremely ignorant to what we have to deal with and how we're forced to live. So with this next round of flushing going on, we're in the middle of it right now. It did reach where we are in Michigan about a week and a half ago. So that's why I wanted to make this video, because I know I did one earlier this year on the Fukushima flushing, and I didn't have as much information as I have now. So because of the condition and where I'm at and being under Chapter 13 bankruptcy due to all these crimes, and then my injury, which is also part of the crimes and everything that's come out of it, that presents a further problem with the fallout of everything I've dealt with, because the income still has to flow properly. So I have to dig further into all of this and figure out how long they plan on doing this for, how frequently they're going to do this for. And I've now done a little more digging, because initially they didn't have all this information out there. But what I do know is they plan on doing this for about the next 40 years. And it could be slightly longer than that. There is 3 reactors they're flushing from. They're going to do the first 2 and eventually get to the third last. They're running this contaminated water through different types of cycles and then mixing it with ocean water and releasing it into the ocean. and then it spreads throughout the course of the entire planet, all through the Pacific Ocean, and it makes its way to every body of water because it's all connected. And then because the Earth is made up of 75% water, it eventually ends up blanketing the Earth toward the end of each round of flushing. So it doesn't matter if you live in the middle of the United States, in the middle of the land, and not near water, it's still going to blanket the entire planet for several weeks. So part of the way they get rid of this as well is geoengineering. I'm not saying that's a good thing, but in this situation, it is helping rid some of this a little quicker. Not that I agree with any of that, but that is part of what they're doing. And then when it comes to the seafood, you would have to think, well, this stuff is getting into all of the seafood, all of the water life on the planet, all the different species. It's getting into all of it. And I actually seen I don't know if it wasn't a post. It was like an article about radioactive material being found in some shrimp at Walmart recently. But what they're not telling everybody is that it's going to affect all seafood going forward as long as they plan on continuing to flush this stuff. So you can expect that to be going on, if you're my age, it's going to go on the rest of your lifetime. So, me personally, I wouldn't eat any more seafood. I wasn't really a big fan of seafood, but I was eating some sometimes. And I did have it a couple times since the flushing began 2 years ago. Both times I had a pretty significant reaction. I was pretty messed up for a couple days each time separately. So I'm well aware that I can't even touch it anymore. But that's going to affect the overall health of the seafood going forward for decades, if not centuries, because of the amount of radioactive material being flushed. So you can expect to have a problem with that, or possibly even some symptoms, even a regular person from that, depending on how often you eat it. And that's going to be a long-term issue because they don't plan on stopping this flushing. This flushing is going on in rounds. It's going to be happening anywhere from 3 to 7 times per year for the next 40 years, probably closer to 50 because I see there's already been numerous setbacks in their time frame of planning. So that's going to be the end result. I mean, it's kind of common sense if you think about it, but I guess depending on where you live in the world, it's going to reach you at some point with each round of flushing. And depending on if you have a prior health condition or not, that'll determine what you're experiencing or if you're experiencing any effects from this. With me, this is going to be a problem for the rest of my life because this is going to go on 40 to 50 years. Well, that's pretty much the rest of my life. So I can expect all of these particles, each flush, to have a problem each time and be forced to shelter in place. My son is in the same boat as me. However, he wasn't significantly re-injured over and over in the manner in which I was because I kept him safe and I kept him home. He did not leave home except for treatment and back for the first 5.5 years of his life. So he wasn't going out into the world getting re-injured in the manner in which I was. And then I have all these ignorant people around me. And then all of these law enforcement agencies and other individuals that my mother has gotten involved in harassing me criminally. All of those have played a role in what has happened with all of this regarding my re-injuries over and over again. So with my son, it's still a problem. He still experiences the effects of it, usually that later that day or at the next day. And it's still going to be a problem, even though his brain tissue is more sealed shut than mine. He was also formed in utero the last 10 weeks with an abundance of carbon monoxide going into his cells. So I've never found another pregnancy, labor, and delivery where it was as extreme as mine. And then the people were left without oxygen and the results of that going forward. I've never found another case like it. So I guess technically he is the experiment, but I know based on what we've experienced all these years, what we've been through, the amount of incapacitation we had initially from the time the initial medical emergency happened, and then the time we finally crossed the first threshold to even know if we could try to pick up pieces of our lives. I just know that it's not optional. We can't travel from point A to point B while this is going on, and it is coming in cycles. So each cycle is lasting Let's say they flush for a week. It takes a week from from the ending date that they're flushing to even a week to get to my house where I live in Michigan from the time they start, but they continue to flush for at least a week each round. So on that last day that they're flushing, it's still another week, still coming to my house heavily. And as they're flushing, the higher the levels are going and the higher and higher it's going to get. I'm not saying they flush for a week each time. It's going to be different every time. Sometimes it's 2 or 3 weeks that they're flushing for. And then it's traveling all throughout the planet. But it's usually about a week from the time they flush to get here. So from the time of the last flush, it's still an additional week. Those particles hang out for about, I'd say, anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks, depending on the amount of precipitation that happens and the temperature outside. That's just been my experience with it. Again, I'm forced to know this. I don't have any other choice. In order to prevent any further suffering and to keep us alive, I have no other choice but to know this information. It's not something I set out to do or chose. But with the position we're in, without having the center and being able to seal the brain tissue shut in a more secure manner, because the home chamber that I have does not have as great a pressure. It's not going to seal the brain tissue shut in any manner that I need it to. So it's not going to happen the way it should have initially after the initial injury, or the way it could have a few years ago. So our results are going to be deadly if we make one wrong move. So I've been through this numerous times now, just with the Fukashima flushing, and again, all their other explosions and other flushes and spills that I've been through, learning each step of the way. So with Fukushima, you can definitely expect, I think it's going to go on for at least 50 years, just because they've had so many setbacks of what I've read already, that I think it's going to go on for about 50 years. Could even be longer than that. But that's just going to change how we have to live our lives going forward forever. So we just have to make sure we're sheltered in place. There is all these arguments it causes with the people in our lives because they're ignorant to our condition, or they don't live in reality, and they make up delusions about what happened to us initially, or other people told them delusions, or whatever, however they perceived the situation when we were in a fight for our lives for years. It causes problems because these people still are not living in reality. So I'd prefer everybody to just stay away from us, because we don't have a support system properly, and we don't have proper medical care help. Everything I need is within my home. And due to my mother's ongoing crimes and the crimes of the large agencies, we're not going to be able to ever have that. On top of the fact that the medical system does not treat our degree of carbon monoxide poisoning properly for us to actually be restored to where we should be. So with me, I've had close to 2,000 hyperbaric oxygen treatments. I am probably a once in a lifetime case of that. I don't think there's any other person who's had as many as me. But I also had the most extreme case of carbon monoxide poisoning with brain injuries, where the people got to live. Now, my son hasn't had nearly as many as me. Um, but he has had quite a few. He's had hundreds for sure. He may have even had 1,000, because he does use the home chamber, as well as he did treat at the center long term as well. So we are a unique case. There is nothing comparable. And unless I'm able to get my home chamber upgraded to the one that has more pressure, which costs anywhere from $30,000 to $60,000, then I don't foresee our brain tissue healing and sealing in the manner in which we need it to travel out and about during these flushes going forward, or any other spills. So right now we're working with removing what we do take in with what we have, and very slowly moving forward at about 10% of the rate we once were when we were treating regularly, before everything got really messed up and our treatments were disrupted. So right now we're just looking at trying to keep ourselves alive. I don't care if people want to make fun of me, or they don't want to believe that that's what we've been through and that's what we're forced to deal with, or that I really spent that much, or our condition is really that severe. Well, it is. And if you want to make fun of me, I promise you, karma is going to hit you times 100, and you're going to experience some type of suffering in your lifetime which will cause you to understand why you're experiencing that when that happens to you. Because what we went through was very extreme. There are a lot of people who are talking a lot of shit and think it's a joke or think I'm over exaggerating, when at no time is that my situation. I wish I had the life I once had. I would never at any time tank everything I've been building every step of the way, all these years, all these decades, and flush it all down the toilet after all the restarts I already had and all the wipeouts from my deranged mother and her criminal actions. There would be no reason for me to do that when I'm the one building and providing everything. So I wish that wasn't our situation, and there's nothing we can do about it. The condition that we have technically is called MUSES, all capitals, MUSES. It is a form of multiple chemical sensitivity. You only get MUSES from having severe carbon monoxide poisoning and or having it untreated. Multiple chemical sensitivity can come from many different ways. But with us, it wasn't something somebody told me we had. We were in an extreme fight for our lives for many years. And upon having one little exposure to anything, including household cleaner for several years, I didn't need somebody to tell me what the problem was. I felt it all go in. My brain tissue was all the way open the first couple years of this. Excuse me. So, with that being that way initially, upon trying to do anything, mind you, I could not clean my house, or I was not able to do laundry or dishes or clean anything. There was numerous things I could not do for about 4 years. I didn't even begin doing any of this stuff for about 4 years. Um, I didn't need somebody to tell me what the problem was. All particles were loading right into the open brain tissue, which was a lot more open initially. So once that happened, we would have very extreme symptoms, 100 times worse than what we do today. But it took almost 200 grand in treatment to get us to where we are today, to not be in that extreme state. So it's not something somebody told me. And then once I knew there was a problem and I started looking into it and seeing if other people had ever experienced it, that's where I found the name for it. There's very few medical professionals who understand this or know that this is a thing, but there are some that do. So at one point, I did find one at a hospital who knew that I knew what I was talking about, understood that that is a thing. It happens to people who are, they end up coming in contact with a large dose or becoming severely poisoned with a large dose of some type of chemical or poison. In my case specifically, it's carbon monoxide, which is why it's labeled MUSES. So it was eventually put in my medical file, but that is what it is called. What it is all the particles load right up through the open brain tissue, and then they enter the cells and add to the already existing carbon monoxide. And then you go into an extreme state of all these severe symptoms, adding to what's already overloaded in your system, with that brain tissue being open, making it that much more extreme. Because most people with carbon monoxide poisoning, it does not break through the brain tissue like that. So that is how I became aware of what it is. It does not matter the chemical, the gas, the toxin. It doesn't matter. It could be food dye. It doesn't matter what it is. They're all problems. With me, I can't even tolerate having an x-ray. It would put me in a place where I'd be incapacitated for months on end. It's not even optional to ever do an x-ray on me if it's needed. So I can't take in any radiation whatsoever. It's not even worth risking my son to even try it, because I am aware he's in the same boat as me. So I just don't think we're ever going to be able to 100% clear what we've taken in. And I don't think the brain tissue is ever going to be 100% sealed, even if we were to treat every day for the rest of our lives with the tools we're left to work with going forward. But that's how I know about it. That's how I had to start looking into it once it all did start coming this way. Once they did start flushing everything, I was forced to. It was not optional. And then once the very first round of it happened and the symptoms were very extreme, a lot of these times death can occur, which is how I ended up dead on the floor at Walmart back in the summer of 2023. So that's the third near-death experience video. You can view that separately. I already released that. But that was from the wildfire particles that were in the air. So, and those are very, very lethal to us. So it does not take much. That's how that happened to me. It becomes that life-threatening that fast. So when the Fukashima flushing started later that year, a couple months later, very extreme symptoms right away. And then going forward, there's all these rounds of flushes. It's not continuous from the time they started it. It's rounds of flushing that where the particles linger about 3 to 6 weeks for each flushing, each set of flushing. And then they're flushing like 4 to 7 times a year. So I guess that's what can be expected going forward with how they're going to go about getting rid of the radioactive materials from the Fukushima disaster. Hopefully nothing else occurs where there's another situation just like it. I don't think we would be able to tolerate an additional set of circumstances like that going on at the same time. With me, I would be the one that's gone first because my son is a little more healed than me. Either way, it's still life threatening. It's very life threatening. Um, but that's how I know all of this. And even like newborn babies, small babies under a year old, that blood brain barrier is not all the way sealed shut yet from being a newborn. It's very dangerous for anybody, really. They're experimenting with the population. They don't know the results of any of this. You're getting repeated exposures to radiation. The particles are lifting off the waterways and blanketing the earth. So, I mean, with small babies, the blood brain barrier isn't all the way sealed yet, anyways. So, that's always going to be a problem for any small babies spending time outside while all this is going on, except for the problem is they're not notifying the general public when this is going on. I'm just forced to know this stuff and stay ahead on it to keep us alive going forward. So there's a lot of issues, and that's just one section of what I deal with because there's going to be other companies who spill other flushes. I've got Ford Motor Company down the street who likes to keep repeatedly spilling. They do it all the time apparently, and they did it 2 more times since I've been back in the home. It just wasn't 15,000 gallons. It's still a problem for us though. So that's just a small portion of what I've dealt with. And so if something else is going on while that's going on, even more life threatening. So yeah, with the Fukushima flushing, it is very dangerous. It doesn't matter who you are going to eventually experience something at some point. With the last round that happened a few months ago, I know I did a video at that time where they were making tornadoes happen all over the United States. That was to help stir up the particles and try to rid them and spread them because they had actually released too much that round, and that's why they were doing that. And I could tell by the level that was out there, that was when I had to hire a company to start cutting my grass. The year prior, I did do my grass. They didn't do any flushing for several months. During that time, I cut my grass the year prior. However, this year, it was all back to back to back with wildfires, with a Ford spill, with the Fukushima flushing. They did way too much. They released way too much that round. And this time around, I'm hoping it's not anywhere near as much. But who knows? They very well could just pick one of those flushes per year where they do release an excessive amount and then maybe a lot less the other times. I just know it's not the same each time with what I've experienced. But these are going to be issues going forward for the general public. And then a lot of people eat seafood. It's going to only add to what all the aquatic life animals within our whole planet, doesn't matter where, because all the water is connected. It's going to add to each round is going to add to their systems, just like it does me. They live in the water. So people who eat seafood regularly, that problem is only going to get worse and worse and worse with each flush. It's all going to get added to, and then the people eating it, it's going to be a lot different than just breathing it in. And again, they don't know the results of all this. They're already lying to the public about what's found. They just said it was shrimp in a certain brand or a certain area or something. It's a lot bigger than that. Nobody's realizing what's going on. They're not notifying the public of the reality of any of this. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. That's common sense. So that's going to be a problem going forward for everybody else. But what else did I want to talk about? Yeah, so for us, we can't really travel up from point A to point B when any flushes or spills are going on, including Fukushima. It goes right through the ventilation system of the vehicle. It takes over. With us, it's life or death. It's a matter of how much can we take in before we're not here anymore, which is, I don't know, 100 times less than what a regular person could take in. Same thing with carbon monoxide. Any amount we can't have. We can tolerate coming in contact with it in passing, but we can't knowingly take in any amounts, or sit in a place with any amount, because it is that lethal to us. But others don't want to believe that. They don't care to understand our reality. Um, and for some reason, they want to continue on as if I have this ongoing mental disorder, which is not the case. It's never been the case. On top of the fact that I hired Charmaine 5.5 years ago when my injury was very severe, still not knowing if we were going to live or not, still in extreme distress. And she watched me get myself to a certain degree, and then watched me get re injured many times and get back to a certain degree each time. She's very well aware this is not a mental disorder, this is a physical injury. And we were left to die initially, which is why it's so severe today. So I will do updates on the Fukushima flushing as time goes on, and as things change with it, or if there's any significant updates. But that's something that everybody can expect, to happen every couple months, every 2 to 3 months. This is going to be happening for the rest of the people my age. It's going to be happening for the rest of our lifetime. So that's something to take into consideration if you eat a lot of seafood, or if you're sensitive to radiation or any gas or particle or toxin or any of that stuff. It's all going to be an issue, even though it's just the tritium from the radiation. It doesn't matter. It's still all going to be a problem overall. So if you want to learn more about that type of condition, or what that could cause the human population down the line, I would look into multiple chemical sensitivity and or muces. I do know that people have my condition from having too much radiation exposure. I have read cases of that. Mind you, I've read thousands of case studies. When I was near death and I could not move, I would fall in and out of consciousness day in and day out, and I read thousands of case studies. So I have found quite a few cases of significant radiation exposure where they end up with the condition that I have. Except for it's not called mucus because it's caused by radiation, so they call it multiple chemical sensitivity. But there are cases like that, and the effects can be delayed, like mine, which is called delayed neurologic sequela. So those are all things that you can look up. But you can definitely expect there to be some type of negative effect on the population long term, and all the seafood long term. I don't know about plants and trees and whatnot throughout the course of the entire earth. I'm not sure about that, but you can expect that there to be some type of fallout from that. It's only common sense. So if everybody's ingesting the stuff or breathing it in regularly or eating the seafood regularly, yeah, that's going to be an excessive dose on top of whatever regular amounts people usually take in. There's going to be fallout from that, with at least a certain percentage of the population. It's not going to be zero. So that's something to think about looking into. I don't care if you don't want to believe me. You don't pay my bills. You don't run my life. Nobody helps me. I do 100% everything myself. So I have no reason to lie about it, or um, I'm not looking for sympathy for anyone. I'm just here to share the knowledge that I have, because it's going to change the outcome of the course of humanity. It's going to change it in the long run with everything I have to talk about. This is just one of those subjects. So do your own homework, look into it. That's how we're forced to live. And eventually it's going to be affecting a certain percentage of the population. So, I mean, this condition is known that that's what happens to people who take in large doses of lethal stuff, toxic substances, and whatnot. That's where the condition got a name from. People, probably quite a few people started popping up with this condition over the course of time, and somebody eventually gave it a name. It was a lot less common, I'd say 50 to 100 years ago. But where we are today, there's a lot more toxins in the world overall. So I think it's becoming a little more popular. But with me, again, it is specifically muces. So it's a little step further than just regular multiple chemical sensitivity. But yeah, look it up for yourself. Look into these different things that I talked about. you can look up the Fukushima flushing, and they do on the TEPCO website, I believe it is, they do release information that they're going to be flushing again, the dates of all that each time they do it. They don't give an advance notice, but each time it's going to happen, it is on their website. So you can look that up from time to time and get an update. If you think something like that's going on, it'll give the dates if it is going on. But it doesn't have a schedule going forward in advance, other than the current cycle of flushing. So that's all something that anybody can look up. But yeah, that's what I wanted to share, just because my situation is very extreme. I know there's a lot of people who are going to be affected by this. So just with my one video, if I can prevent somebody from being in an extreme state of systemic toxicity where it affects the rest of their lives and affects all quality of life going forward, then I'd rather prevent somebody else from living in the boat that I'm living in, because I didn't have anybody looking out for me while this was going on. So that's where I'm at with things. I was forced to learn on my own. Just thought I'd share that with everyone. I'll be back with more. Thanks. Bye.